Hi, everybody. Welcome back. Today and this week, we're going to talk about Macbeth, Act 1, Scenes 5. I'm double checking here. Yes. Scenes 5, 6, and 7. Now, Scene 6 is super short, so 5 and 7 are really where we want to focus. Okay. So when we left off with Macbeth last week, the king had been invited, well, kind of invited himself to Macbeth's home on his way back to Inverness. The king had awarded Macbeth Thane of Cawdor, and Macbeth has been kicking around in his head ever since he heard the prophecy, the idea that one day he might be king. And when he hears that Malcolm is officially named the king's heir, he starts thinking really creepily, what do I need to do to get rid of Malcolm? So we have suddenly Macbeth in his head, like really divided, because he's loyal to the king and he says polite, respectful things to the king. But in his head, he's already kind of juggling how he might get into power. All of this based on the witch's prophecy. Right? Okay, so when we pick up in Act 5, it's the introduction of Lady Macbeth. She's going to be an incredibly powerful character in the play, so definitely pay attention to her. And what we see her in the beginning of this scene, she's reading a letter Macbeth wrote her, and he's telling her about his encounter with the witches, what they said, and that the king is coming to visit. Okay, and then right after that, you're going to see suddenly a servant's like, the king's on his way. And we're going to see Lady Macbeth's reaction to the news in the letter. So we spent a lot of this scene with her, and then Macbeth comes in, and then immediately after the king arrives. Now, pay a lot of attention to how Macbeth addresses his wife in this letter. How do they function as a couple? You know, because they're husband and wife. Obviously, they've been a couple for a long time. How do they function as a couple? Like, how do they talk to each other? And then, after she finishes reading the letter, she has this really immediate reaction where she says, like, Macbeth is too soft. Macbeth is too soft-hearted. But that's a real contrast, because we saw him brutal on the battlefield. So why does his wife think he's too soft-hearted? Is Macbeth different when he's with her than when he's by himself on the battlefield? Like, a lot of the time that's true, right? The way a person is with their significant other can be really different than the way they are by themselves or in other situations. So pay attention to that difference, okay? And after the messenger comes and says the king is arriving, Lady Macbeth says, okay, go take care of him, go take care of the messenger who says the king's coming. And then she gives this monologue to the audience, this soliloquy, but she's not really speaking to the audience. She's speaking to the spirits. She says, come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts. So she's invoking, she's either praying or she's like trying to cast a spell. Is she tied in with the witches and magic? We don't know, and you get to form your own theory here. But she gives this whole speech about unsex me here and fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty. Basically, get rid of everything in my body that makes me soft and womanly and kind and, feminine, and give me everything that's masculine, that's brutal and hard and cruel. Which is a really interesting idea of what's masculine and feminine, isn't it? Because we certainly don't abide by quite such a dichotomy now. So pay attention to what she's doing here. It's kind of one of her key scenes. It's a very, very famous speech. And then, right after that speech, Macbeth appears. And they greet each other. Obviously, he's been off on the battlefield. She hasn't seen him in a while. They greet each other. They're really sweet. They're really kind, right? They definitely love each other, and they're definitely a couple. And he tells her the king is arriving. And she seems to know what's going on in Macbeth's head. She has a line that says something like, "Your face, my fane, is as a book where men may read strange matters." Like, I can tell by just your face what's going on in your head. And then she gives him this advice. And this is really creepy advice. She says, "Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it." Isn't that great? She's advising him to be deliberately deceitful, to be two-faced. And think about why she would be telling him to do that, right? It's such a good line. Okay, she's got some of the best lines in the play. And she is brutal. Like, she goes through that whole, like, unsex me, make me like a man. She was never soft to begin with. Okay, then that's scene 5. Scene 6, the king arrives with Banquo and all the other lords, and Lady Macbeth greets him. The thing to pay attention in this scene, because it's very, very short, it's less than half a page. Look at the number of times the word to or twice is used, or double, all that kind of idea of there being two of something. Because, remember, she's just told Macbeth to be two-faced, to act like one way, but actually be another way. So all of these ideas of like two, double, like the fact that there might be hidden meanings or there's something going on in the background, like all of this stuff, pay attention to that, okay? You're going to see tons of it. And then, and this is a fantastic place for dramatic irony. Okay, now, those of you who had me in 10th grade, when we did Wait Until Dark, which is the fantastic film with Audrey Hepburn, you probably remember dramatic irony. But even if you don't, it's okay. Dramatic irony is the idea that we as the audience know something that the characters don't. And you experience this all the time. Think of every horror movie you've ever seen, right? Where the blonde cheerleader is going down into the basement in her nightgown, right? Where the axe murderer is. And you're yelling at the screen, "Don't go down there! The evil guy is down there!" That's dramatic irony. You know something the character doesn't know. And you're trying to tell them and warn them, and of course, you can't. But that gets the reader and the viewer involved, right? This scene where the king arrives starts building dramatic irony. And we saw it at the end of the previous bit too, where we now know that Macbeth is starting to plot and plan and starting to really think, maybe we're going to kill the king. We know that Lady Macbeth has just told him, like, be the serpent under the flower. Meanwhile, the king is walking into the castle going, la, 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 what a beautiful day. Isn't this a lovely castle? Oh, I love you so much, Macbeth. Yay, I trust you with my life, right? The king is the blonde cheerleader going into the basement, and Macbeth is the guy planning to murder him. And then we get to scene 7, and scene 7 is really where it starts to kick off, okay? Macbeth has this entire monologue. He's by himself, right? They're waiting for him. Dinner's ready or something, and everybody's waiting for him in another room. But Macbeth is standing there going, "If it were done, when 'tis done, 'tis well it were done quickly." And basically, I've got my book right here. Basically, he's trying to talk himself into killing the king, because the king's now under his roof, right? He's got the perfect opportunity. This is like Knives Out, right? He's got the perfect opportunity to do it. But he also knows he really, really shouldn't. And in this big speech, he goes through all the reasons why he shouldn't. The king is his guest. You're supposed to be kind and respectful to your guests. You're not supposed to murder them. The king is his king. He owes him loyalty. Murder is wrong, right? He just fought a war against a traitor. There's all kinds of reasons he should not kill this king. On the other hand, if he does kill the king, he gets power, and his wife's egging him on, and it seems like it's going to happen anyway, so why shouldn't he do it, right? All of this stuff. So in this speech, he's going back and forth in his head, and by the end of the speech, he's talked himself out of killing the king. And we as viewers are like, good, right? Good. He's going to do the right thing. He was on the wrong track, but he's changed his mind. He's going to do the right thing. And then who walks into the scene but his wife? And basically says, are you a man or a mouse? You going to do this thing or not? Because if you are not willing to do this thing, I'll do it for you. Man up. And then again, we have this discussion of what's masculine, what's feminine, what does it mean to be a man? And all of this conversation that goes back and forth, okay? And she basically talks him back into the murder by the end of the scene. And again, it's a very short scene, but by the end of the scene, he says, the last line in the act is, false-faced must hide what the false heart doth know. And it reiterates that whole be the serpent under the perfect flower idea, right? He's got to go into the dinner with the king looking like he loves the king, but he's going to, in his heart, planning to kill him. And that idea of somebody being false, somebody being two-faced, like we've all experienced that. And you see that play out. And this moment is one of the real turning points of this, what makes it a tragedy of Macbeth. He's a man who could make a different decision and chooses to rebel and murder his king for the potential of power. Now, what about Malcolm? Right? Malcolm's the heir. Well, we're going to see what's going to happen to Malcolm. All right, so as you read and listen or watch this section of the play to the end of Act 1, keep all these things in mind. Pay attention to the characters. In particular, pay attention to Lady Macbeth and Macbeth, because those are your two characters that are being like the biggest turning points, the most interesting changes. All right? And so you're going to go into Schoology. You're going to read these two sections, make notes after each section so you don't get too far ahead with your notes. And then use your notes to answer your questions and do your discussion at the end. All right? During our class call this week, we're going to read some of this out loud. So as you read over it or listen to it, maybe pick a character if you would really like to read them out loud. Think about what character you might like to do. And we will take some turns with that. All right? And I will see you on our class call. Bye, everybody.